Okay, well, we have more than a quorum, so I think we can get started. So I will officially call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission for Thursday, the 26th of August, 2021. And my first order of business actually is to thank my vice chair, Patricia Pecknick, for running the meeting 2 weeks ago. Thank you very much, Patricia, and you did an excellent job, as I have to say, as was expected, but still did a great job. So thank you very much. I would also note that I was absent, and of the people who were absent, myself and Mr. Sandrone, we have reviewed the recording and handed in the affidavit to that effect. So we have thereby enabled ourselves to participate in the discussions of matters that were covered on at that meeting. Okay, I'm going to skip the usual stuff about public hearings because I don't expect we'll have one, but if one should come up, I'll review the procedure for that. The people who are attendees, that is the public, we won't be able to see you and your audio is muted. The people who are need to speak, such as the applicants and so on, they will be unmuted for their part of the agenda. So we'll start with a roll call of the commissioners. I usually take them in alphabetical order. The first is Mr. Carnwath.
Yep.
Thank you. And Mr. Mark Sandrone.
Yes, present.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Mr. Christopher Fay.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Mr. Joe Morgan.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. McNamee, I don't see him looks like he's not here. So I'm going to temporarily move him over to the not here group. A second for the record. And the Vice Chair Pecknick.
Yes, here.
Thank you. And the Chair is Glenn Richards is obviously here. So having that got out of the way, just a quick reminder, commissioners, do try to remember to state your name if you're either making a motion or seconding one, so the minutes can reflect that correctly. And we'll proceed to our first order of business. Now, as I don't believe well, let me ask Caitlin or Andrew, is anyone here to speak to the 2224 Olive Street, or is it simply a request to continue that we can act on without the applicant?
Yeah, our understanding is just the request and the action of the board would be sufficient.
Okay, thank you. So the applicant has requested a continuance to the 9th of September. So would someone care to make a motion to continue that matter without prejudice to the meeting of the 9th of September, 2021?
I'll make that motion. Mark Sandron.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Seconded by?
Seconded, Joe Morgan.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, I'll go around the roll call again. Mr. Carnwath, your vote on that?
I vote yes. Continue.
Thank you. Mr. Sandrone?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. Patricia Pecknick?
I vote yes, and Mr. McNamee joined at 7:04.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Did you join in time to hear the introduction of this item and what the motion is, Peter?
I did not, Chair, so I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you very much. Just for information, we just voted to continue the matter of 2224 Olive Street per request of the applicant to September 9th. The next item on the agenda, 30 Winter Street, applicant Eric Premack. This was introduced 2 weeks ago and presented to the commission. The commission voted at that time that it was historically significant and preferably preserved. There was a demolition delay imposed, and there were some concerns raised by the commission. There's been some action in between. I believe Mr. Premack has been before the ZBA, but that I believe is simply been continued. What I think, well, we may decide to continue again this evening. Now, Mr. Primack, is he unable to speak to us here? Is the audio on?
Yes, Eric.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Primack. So the applicant is here. What I was thinking about how to best handle this. So we did a site visit. Let me just say just a couple of quick words, Mr. Primack, then I'll give you an opportunity to say anything you'd like to say for this evening, okay? And we can go take it from there. And all I wanted to say is very briefly that there was a site visit this morning. Myself, Vice Chair Pecknick, and Commissioner Morgan met with the applicant and others at the premises. We were allowed to see both the exterior and interior, and came away with interest and with our impressions as to the condition, which it was a lesson to me once again that photographs can give you a rough idea, but nothing quite like seeing it in person. All right, so I don't want to say any more right now. We can deliberate after the applicant has made comments. So Mr. Primack, just having introduced that, and before the board discusses further, would you like to what would you like to say to the commission about anything that's changed since your first appearance, and in terms of trying to accommodate the concerns of the commission and so on, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. First, I want to thank you guys for coming out this morning. I totally agree with you. It's pictures tell 1,000 words, but there's nothing like being inside one of these old houses to see what it's like. So since the last meeting, the main thing I would say that I know the commission had some opposition to was the front second story windows, which at first I was going to expand to meet code. And then I had a conversation with the building inspector, and I was told, unbeknownst to me at the time, that there is an exemption on antique homes for egress. So we decided to keep the existing windows, the 12/8, which I always said that I'd be happy to as well if we were allowed. So that being said, I think the rest of what I have to present is pretty much the same, with the exception that I have a little bit more detail on what I put into the elevations, on the elevation drawings, just labeling every window specifically, labeling that we will be keeping the 2 chimneys that are in the front, and that we'll be planning to demolish the chimney that's in the rear, along with keeping, being a little bit more detail about keeping the trim, the wood trim in the front, all the existing trim, all the existing clapboard, replacing as existing. So I know there was some questions as to, I said I would be replacing it, but we weren't sure, you guys weren't sure what I was going to replace it with. So again, keeping all existing side doors and existing clapboard and all wood trim associated, restore and replace where necessary to match all existing. So I think other than that, other than, giving you a little bit more information, I'm still at the same plan, other than changing those front windows. And I think also by the site visit, those who did come will probably have a better understanding of why I do want to increase that second story. And I would, and for those who don't, maybe you can pass on that information, and I'll leave you there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Primack. The one thing I would just say about that last point was that part of the problem, and I'm not sure it got covered 2 weeks ago, is that because of because of what, I'm not sure, but in any event, that rear portion, there's a couple of steps down. So I think it was covered actually 2 weeks ago. So that's part of the problem. If I understand it correctly, Mr. Primack, you would like to kind of have that second floor be at all the same level. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So in order to do that, obviously the ceiling needs to be higher, or there just wouldn't be enough room. So 2 weeks ago, there were a number of concerns. What I think, I have a sort of a list of my concerns, but I thought maybe the practical thing to do would be to ask you all to weigh in with anything that you're still concerned about that has not been addressed by the latest revisions that the applicant has provided. So this, hopefully you can find that as a reasonable way to proceed. And then what we can do is if your list has things that have already been stated by people before you, you can just say so we can nip right along. If there's no volunteer to go first, I can just again take you either in alphabetical order or the order you're showing up here. Looks like the order you're showing up has Commissioner Fay on top. Chris, did you have specific concerns that we can put on the list of anything that still needs to be addressed, or would you say you're happy with the current state of affairs?
Well, I'm going to be honest in that I didn't quite make it all the way through the recording.
Mhm.
So where I left
That's right, you
off, yeah, I wasn't there. So I did try to catch up today, but things happen. So I left off around the time Malcolm had made the comment about the windows, and I'm glad to hear that that was checked into. So I looked at the house. I live around the corner from the house, so I drive by it or walk by it almost every day. So I guess my comment would be anything, obviously, that we can do to save this house would be appreciated by everybody, I think. So I did have some concerns about the height. I know Tom raised that question at the last meeting. It seems like it's a 4.5. It might be a bit my understanding of it. So, but those are my only concerns. I guess the rest of it I would defer to people that were actually more part of the conversation.
Okay, and my apologies, I forgot you were absent that meeting. So Chris, if there's any vote tonight, since you haven't submitted the affidavit and all that, we would have to exclude you from that. Okay, who's next? Peter, were you? Yeah, you
I did submit the affidavit.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did submit the affidavit. I just hadn't finished the whole recording.
I see. Okay. Mr. McNamee, I believe you were there, right?
I was at the meeting 2 weeks ago. I was not at the site visit.
Oh, yes, I know that, but I'm talking in reference to the meeting. So I'm sort of compiling a list of any concerns, if any, that might still need to be addressed. Did you have anything in mind that of things that you feel still need to be addressed?
2 questions. And Mr. Premack may have already addressed this, but I'm not sure. So the description of the work from last week and from the application talks about replacing the trim around the windows, or replacing the windows and replacing the trim with flat stock. And I think I heard Mr. Premack say that that is not going to be the case, that all the trim will be either restored or replicated, or am I putting words in his mouth?
Okay, we can, once we get through, we can have him address that.
So to be more succinct about that, my concern would be if the windows, if there is work being done on the windows, I would hope that it's restoration work, and that the casings around the windows not be replaced by simple flat stock, but be replaced in kind with what's there. My second question or concern, I'm in a dicey spot. I could not make the walkthrough, but if raising the height of the rear portion is to avoid a step down, then I'm not a big fan of that. I don't mind raising it in principle, but raising it just to avoid a simple step down it is an old house. There's nothing wrong with step down. I think that conceivably lends some interest to it. So
Mhm.
those are my only two comments.
Okay, thanks.
Did you want me to address these as you go, or do you want me to wait until?
Yeah,
everything
thank you, Mr. Primack. Why don't we get through them, and because and then I'll give you time to respond. Okay.
Okay, no problem. I'll just take some notes.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, Mark Cindrone, that's right. You did listen to the meeting, correct?
I did indeed. It was a wonderful afternoon, reliving some experience that other people had. So it was quite interesting. I do share the concern about the change in height. I do share the concern about the availability of the view from the pedestrian trail in back. And I also was not entirely clear, while I understand that the chimney is in sad shape, and it certainly looks like it from the photos, and I have not I am still a little bit puzzled as to why the chimney has to be taken down and what the reason was for that.
Okay, sorry to have to tell you this, Mark, but you started breaking up, sort of freezing and getting chopped up right just after you started talking about that rear chimney. You said the last thing we could get clearly was that you can see it's not in good shape, and then you kind of broke up a little bit. If that continues to happen, you might try turning off your video if it's a bandwidth issue. But
Okay.
Could you tell us the last part of that comment again?
The last part had to do with the chimney,
Right.
and was wondering what the theory behind taking the chimney down, even though I understand it's not in great shape and may
Right.
not be original.
Okay, got it. Yep. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Mr. Morgan, your impressions. Now, let me think. Were you here 2 weeks ago, Joe?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, no, I've seen these drawings, and of course, they haven't changed, except for those windows that Mr. Primack mentioned on the front facade. I visited today, and actually, the interior does look much better than I'd expected. I mean, it's pretty. It's been neglected for decades. You look at the exterior and say it's in bad shape, but the interior, even though maybe it hasn't been exposed to, I don't know, direct water damage, it's just been neglected. It has not been painted for generations, I would say. It's kind of scary, but it seems to be stable. It seems to be solid, intact. My main concern was for the reframing of the exterior, that the drawings don't show the addition to be demolished, at least the demo calcs. And yet I don't see how it's really going to be rebuilt, the floor raised and the roof raised without, more intervention on the actual wall framing. Whether the skin is replaced or not, it would have to be completely reframed probably on the inside, but it hasn't been tabulated in the demo calcs. So I'm going to assume they're going to try to keep the exterior walls, but I still stand fast on my request due to those changes to this fairly old addition on the rear. That I would like to see a structural engineering report on that rear portion to see how that impacts the main body of the historical structure right on the street. So, and we know we've seen other projects where this is relevant, and I'd like to follow that through, because we are raising the roof, we are changing the load conditions on the rear.
Right.
The next thing I'd like to address is the gable. I really most vehemently oppose the further obstruction of the gable. I think it should not be obstructed any more than it currently is. And I think a detail needs to be, and an elevation and a section through there needs to be developed by the applicant's architect to address that condition. From my own sense, regardless, you know, I mean, the floor, if you raise the floor line, if you just follow the existing, if you follow the existing floor line there at the gable into this new addition and just respect the window sill and head heights and the cornice elevation, I think you can drop that roof line, that sight line of the roof edge to that cornice line and just build a flat roof. You're basically building a flat roof anyway, so just why not build that addition as a flat roof addition and protect the gable elevation. And then my last comment is just there needs to be more explicit annotation of materials that are going to be replaced. Any renovation materials on the exterior need to be called out precisely. And I think that's a follow-up on what Commissioner McNamee, excuse me, has already requested. I think the details, the drawings need to be very detailed, either on the drawings or in a separate list of material specifications, but it needs to be complete and comprehensive.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. But before you go, could you explain what you mean by protect the gable end? Like specifically, you talking about the gambrel shaped gable or that gable in the rear?
In the rear.
house?
I'm sorry, it's in the rear. It's because the proposed changes to the roof of the later addition, which is, you know, flat roofed more or less,
Right.
is obscuring. You see that in that elevation, you see a dash line which represents the existing intersection of the pitched roof with the gable.
Right.
And it's being raised by, I'd say that's like 3 to 4 feet. I don't think it needs to go that high in order to get more usable head height within the second floor spaces. It may be 7 feet. You may not be getting 8 feet, but you might be getting something closer to a code of 7 or 6 feet, 7 foot 6 inches. You don't have to go that high. And I think if it works in the existing building, whatever that head height is immediately to the left in the gable, I don't see why those can't be just carried across. All of those datum elevations can be carried across in the addition.
Yeah, Andy or whoever's driving, can you show the existing rear elevation? This is the proposed that we're looking at now. And it might better show that roof that, yeah, okay. So this is what you're talking about in the existing view. You can see the full extent of the rake boards there. Yeah. And how it intersects with that. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Right. I'd be okay to intersect the upper portion of the roof eave and cornice, but I think the gable ought to remain readable. This projecting addition may not make it so legible from the path, from the bike path. However, I do believe it's important not to obstruct the gable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. So that, yeah, it looks like it can go up a bit without interfering with at least, the basic design. Okay.
Right. So you get I think you could achieve the thickness of your roof ceiling framing if you go with a flat roof there, and you could still get the same floor to ceiling clearances as you would have in the main house.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, and just as a note for Mr. Primack, if you're taking notes, and I'll get to our discussion with the building commissioner later, but it is, he does have a certain amount of, or quite a bit actually, of latitude with antique houses in terms of interpreting the codes. His main concern is safety issues. So if there's the ceiling height, for example, if it's not, quote, to code, that isn't necessarily a problem unless he foresees a potential safety issue. We can talk about that if we need to. All right, thank you, Commissioner Morgan, very much. Vice Chair Pecknick, Do you have any further concerns that have not already been stated?
It won't prevent me from restating them, but yeah. I am glad we resolved the issue of the window dimensions, but the windows themselves must be kept. So under the city's guidelines for preservation and replacement of historic wood windows, a new report, and this is from, I think, July 2019, the city has historic window restoration guidelines under which only windows beyond repair should be replaced. And in fact, the DCOD ordinance outright says that one of the purposes of preservation zoning is to help perpetuate and maintain the established skill of local tradespeople, including window and chimney restoration experts. So I would only approve a plan that retained and restored all historic windows. And it seems to be that there are only a couple that may not be repairable. And I can assure Mr. Premack that it would be more cost effective for him to do it that way anyway. I agree with Mr. McNamee, the plan would have to clearly state the trim, the window trim, the doorway trim, everything will be restored. I understand that that's the stated intent. The rear elevation is on a public way. I would like to see an illustration of the proposed windows on the rear. So of course I'd like true divided light windows, but I'd like to know what is being meant by SDL and if it's the sort of tic-tac-toe thing in between glass or if it's something pressed on, I don't know. I agree with Mr. McNamee about the window trim. Just restore it, replicate it. It shouldn't be flat stock. About the roof height, I did appreciate the visit, and I do have a better understanding of why you would want to increase the roof height of the back half of the shed addition. Because I was going through the doorway and I'm 5'3", and that doorway is cut, right? I don't mind the step down. I find it charming. But I can understand the desire for a little more room up there. For me, the new roof should maintain the slope of the existing roof. I think it's very compatible from either Winter Street or from the rail trail. I know the contractor said on the site visit, the slope would be retained, but on the plans, it's almost flat. And, here's where Mr. Morgan and I, have different ideas about that. But I do think I agree with Mr. Morgan, or that we agree with one another, that it doesn't have to be raised that much. So 2 feet, if you raise it 2 feet, you'd have a ceiling height of 7, which would still be to the standard code at the lowest point of the slope. And I do want to say, if the argument that's being made is that those rooms are not now habitable space, then by raising the roof, are you adding living space? You know what I mean? If it's not habitable now, then are you adding less than 500 square feet of living space? I think that's something to think about. So I think 3 or 4 feet is too much. I think 2 is okay. We did, talk last week that the shed addition appears on the 1888 Sanborn map, but is much earlier, as we see from those twin fireplaces. That rear addition was the kitchen. All these old houses in Newburyport had those rear additions where you could cook without burning the whole house down. And Mr. Premack's right, that beehive oven, boy, is that banged up. I also agree with Mr. Morgan about our ongoing concerns about structural engineering reports and what's the extent of demo. And it's a shame that the architect is not on the call, but I think that Mr. Premack should definitely get on the September 9th agenda, since he's going to the ZBA on the 14th. We can't verbally agree to, a memo. We would need to have a plan submitted with everything we've talked about that we sign off on. And then the same plan goes to the ZBA to request the upward extension, if that's how it's going to be done. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Let's make a note here. Malcolm, I'm sorry, did I skip you?
Oh, that's fine. I've enjoyed everybody's comments, and I'm still kind of deliberating
Okay,
in my mind.
Yeah, because I remember in the beginning of the meeting there was some trouble getting you on into the meeting, but then I think you did get in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Well, in my list, such as it is, let me see, I think everything that I had noted has pretty much been discussed. The most important things for me were about the windows, particularly in the front facade. That's been talked about. I think that we're all, from what I've heard, in agreement that it's not a question of, beyond keeping them the same size, they need to, the windows need to be restored. From what I saw today, the ones in the front are certainly restorable. There was one on, it would be, I guess, the northeast side and the alley side where, I mean, one of the, I forget which is the rail and which is the style, but anyway, one of the structural parts of the window sash itself was literally not even there. And that one may be have reached the point in its life that it might not be repairable, but I'd be willing to hear from, someone who's more. Yeah, in fact, it's that window you see here. Looks like when this picture was taken, maybe it was still there, but I know when I was there today, the bottom rail of that window you see there in the alley in the second floor was just wasn't there. Anyway, I think it was the bottom part of the upper sash. At any rate, there were interior storm windows, which probably helped with energy efficiency and drafts, but unfortunately it left the primary windows exposed to the elements, which resulted in a lot of weathering and wear and tear on those. So anyway, we talked about those. I'm also share Commissioner Morgan's concerns and Patricia Pecknick's about the need to get better resolution of the structural implications of what is planned in the back. I think Joe put it well, and he said that, if you're going to change the height of the floor, I mean, I'm sure it's not a question of simply taking the floor that's there and building something on top of that. I assume that floor is going to have to be removed and new framing for a new floor put in, et cetera, which is, it starts to get into a significant amount of reframing. And so, Mr. Primack, maybe when you make your comments, you can talk about how much is or isn't known about what's behind the plaster or behind the clapboards or behind the sheathing, and all of the above. Sounds like because of the circumstances where you don't have full access to the house inside and out right now, in that it's occupied by the current owner, et cetera, that's problematic. I also agree with the comments about the completeness of the plans. The best, sometimes materials listings are separate or supplemental. Most often they are noted directly on the plans, which is the easiest for a board such as ours or the ZBA or anyone to be able to quickly understand what the plans actually call for. So I'd really like to see that. And, the specific interpretation of what SDL means. I understand SDL to be simulated divided light, as to what that stands for. That sometimes that means a sort of a framework that is set between two large panes of glass. So there's no actual profile, a Muntin profile or anything, but it could also mean a framework that is applied to the exterior, both and the interior, so that you have it's still one piece of glass, but there is a stronger perception of it being composed of separate lights, and you have shadow lines, etc. And of course, the ideal is true divided light, where if it was, let's say in the upper story 12/8, there would actually be 12 individual pieces of glass separated by muntins and so on. And let's see, I think those were my concerns, the structural, yeah. One last thing that wasn't mentioned, but well, was sort of alluded to, but not directly, and that's about the windows, what I call existing conditions report. And I'll talk to the planning office about this and see exactly what it's called for. We need to know what the existing conditions are. And I know on the form, the website says existing conditions photos, and you have supplied those, and they were helpful. But there could be, there's things that could be added, such as the sort of a window inventory that specifies exactly which windows are repairable. I think quite many of them are, if not most of them, and which are just, have gotten to the point where they need to be replaced. We need to know exactly which those are, and the ones that need to be replaced, what they're going to be replaced with. So with that, that kind of completes my list. As you can see, it overlaps quite a bit with those of the others. So at this point, Mr. Premack, would you like to respond to any of those concerns?
I'll respond to all of them. Let me see where I can start. As far as restoring the windows, first off, I can't remember who it was who started, but the windows and the trim as they exist is what I wrote down. Flat stock is what many of them are. That's the only reason we put flat stock. I'm not saying that I'm taking out existing trim and replacing it with flat stock. Most of those windows have flat stock as trim. As far as the excuse me, the height was not just to avoid the step down, but was to create usable space. As those of you who were in there, it wasn't just one step down, but then you have a second step down into the second portion of that room. And granted, someone is they have beds in that space. You could probably put a child's room in there, or perhaps a hobbit. But to claim that that's good space for an adult is ridiculous. And the second part is it's not just the increase in the second floor that I'm looking for. I'm not trying to get 7-8 foot ceilings, but there's also the first floor, if you recall, where the kitchen is and where the beehive oven is, that has very low ceilings. So the idea is to raise that second floor so that in turn we can raise the ceiling height of that back kitchen area, and then give us enough room for a standable room upstairs and usable room. If all of you saw to the when you're looking at the existing rear elevation, that all of that space that's to the right of that gable is, it does not conform to modern standards for living. There's a walk-through bathroom. There's 2 small rooms in the back that, as you said, Patricia, you had to duck your head at 5'3", so that it's not usable space. We wanted to keep as much as the gable as we could so that you can still see it. The idea for that was to not just cut that straight across, and to keep that gable so that you see where the original house was and where the new section begins. In projects that I've done before with historical, I've often heard that is that's a big issue with you guys, that you want to see if there is a new addition. You want to see where the old house was and where the new house begins. So again, we're only going up 3 feet. I don't think that's a lot. We're not making a flat roof. There is still a pitch, but if we don't have some kind of increase in height by at least 3 feet, we won't get the extra foot that we need for the first floor, and we certainly won't get the extra 2 feet that we need for the second floor.
Pardon me for the interruption.
Sure.
But as long as we're talking about, since you mentioned the ceiling, that question came up. So how do you propose to do all that reframing without, how do you know the existing conditions, the posts and it looks like the age of even these additions, well, the most recent one, I'm not sure if that's timber frame, but the how can you know that you can do all that with the existing
Well,
framing
we
it
don't know,
without
we
having?
don't know, I'm sorry, we don't know exactly as far as the framing go, what we need as far as posts, but we generally go by what we see, the shape of what we see, especially say in the foundation, okay? So the framing in the basement was all pretty solid, especially in the back. You saw the framing in the back, which was a newer section, was much newer framing. And as old as it is, it's more solid than what's in the front. So that's why we know that we can do it. Certainly, we may get into some posts and some beams that do need to be replaced, but generally the reframing goes from the inside. It's not, we don't rip off that whole back of the house and say we start from scratch. We can't, obviously we can't do that. If I, we'd be above the percentage that we have to keep in order to pass the demo delay in the first place. I did it on Warren Street. I did it at 12 Purchase Street. I did it at 14, 16 Purchase Street. The very same things. We had very old houses that needed to be reframed. We kept the exterior and we reframed them from the inside. Sometimes you start from the top and then reframe down. You do the basement, then you do the top floor, then you do the second floor. What we usually do when we get into something, and as far as the structural aspect of it, so we get in there and we'll start to demo the plaster, okay? And then we'll see what the framing is, and we submit a framing plan to the building inspector for what we're going to do. Now, depending on what we submit, he gives us his opinion as to whether he wants us to have a structural engineer. We don't usually ask for a structural engineer to begin with because we can't see what we're dealing with. So that goes to you guys. I can't submit a structural engineering plan until we start demo. It's, the chicken before the egg. I can't see what's in there until we start demoing walls. And it's usually, it's always up to the building inspector to determine whether he wants us to have a structural engineer in there or not. If the framing is fine, if the beams are fine, we go along and frame it as is with the gentleman that you guys met today. So to submit a structural engineering plan before we get into demo is pretty much impossible to do. And that would lead me to my next comment, which was regarding the windows. I know everybody understands about wanting to restore windows. I'm a little surprised by the fact that you guys saw that place today and actually think that there's probably more than 5 windows that could be restored. The problem with restoring some and not restoring others is that then you end up with a hodgepodge. Okay, so we replaced them all. We replaced them with simulated divided light. Again, same as what I've used on Warren Street, same what I used on 2 Purchase Street houses. They do have the grills in between the lights. That's simulated divided light, as most Jackson Lumber or Georgetown Lumber, any of these lumber yards would call it. If you do want the exterior grills, we can add those on. If that is something that would make you guys feel better about the windows, that we can do. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think it's a great look, but if you think it looks better, then by all means. So excuse me.
And just quick interruption. It's really, just to correct one thing. It's not a question of whether anyone in this commission or the commission as a whole, quote, feels better about a given thing. Our responsibility is a project that involves rehabilitation and or restoration of a historic structure is done according to the Secretary's standards, which goes, as you may know, the first option is to restore. The second option is to repair, and the third option at last resort is to replace. So that's what we're about. It's not about whether our personal preference is one thing or the other. The other thing is I just want to make sure I understood you correctly, Mr. Premack. It sounded like you said that for consistency, you plan to replace all the windows throughout the house.
That is more than likely true, yes. I mean, if we get to a portion where, say all the windows on the left side are okay, right? Then we keep all the windows on the left side. But if 2 or 3 need to be replaced, you have to replace them all. Because you can't have, like I said, you can't have it looking like a hodgepodge where some are replaced and some of the originals. And it's to dispute what Patricia said, it's not cost effective. It's far more effective to take out the windows, replace them with new windows. They're more energy efficient. You're talking about old windows on old rope sashes, and very, very, very non-energy efficient, very drafty. I've done this enough times that believe me, if I say cost effective, if I can go in and say, why can't we just keep all the old windows? Then that's great, but it doesn't work.
As long as we're on the subject of replacement, is it a similar case with the clapboards where you're planning to basically strip all the clapboards and put new clapboards on?
Yes, I mean, for the most part, there are some sections. I don't know if you saw today. I think I pointed it out to Patricia at one point. There had been, probably because some water leaks, some sections of the exterior that had been replaced, fairly recently.
Mhm.
Not in the front, I think mostly in the sides, and they would be kept if we don't have to. And the sheathing underneath is not bad, which we'll be able to see again from the inside once we take out the old plaster. If the sheathing's not rotten and the clapboard is okay, then we can keep it, scrape it, repaint it. If we have to replace it, then we'll replace it.
Yeah.
It's an awful lot, believe me. It's an awful lot of clapboard. I prefer that it was in good enough shape to scrape and paint.
Yeah, I'm very much aware of it. I'm dealing with myself, and especially keeping the reveal. It's typically about 3, maybe 3¼ inches, which is less than what is usually done today. So that adds to the cost as well, because obviously you need more clapboards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Going back to some of the lists, the view from the rail trail, you can, I mean, maybe in the winter time, but if you look, I think there's maybe one of the last pictures is the view from the rail trail. You can barely see the back of the house. You can't see the roof. You can't see the gable. And again, I think whatever we do is going to be a drastic improvement from what exists now. The chimney, we were discussing chimney. You guys saw the chimney is in very, very bad shape. And does need to, that is probably, if anything, more of a safety issue. It's been shored up, I'm sure, on several occasions. So I think that might have addressed everything. Just as again, the idea is to keep the gable so that you can see it, but raise that enough so that you have better livable space downstairs in that kitchen and room enough upstairs. I mean, I look at these projects, and granted, I want to restore it, and anything worth doing is worth doing correctly. It isn't about just restoring the house so that we have a few small rooms, and there is absolutely an economic aspect of it. You guys saw how it looks inside, how, it has been painted probably 20, 30 years. I can't imagine that you would think that those windows are going to be operational.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at all, actually, if they are. They're not rope and sash type and weights, at least the ones in the front I'm talking about. They're an older part where the upper part's stationary and the lower sash moves up and down. It's held up with a little kind of a catch device on the side. And by the way, there may be some interior shutters hiding in there because I noticed some channels in the sills, but that's beside the point. Well, I think that from what I'm hearing, the commission is well, we could take a vote on it. I don't think the plans are in final enough shape for us to take a meaningful vote on approving them or not, because there are just too many of these questions that it's one thing to discuss it in a meeting, but especially because you have multiple boards involved and you know, and other building commission and others, these things really need to be nailed down. So what I'm thinking is that is to put off a vote on whether the plans as submitted as of today are okay, to give you a chance to fill in these missing details, specifically about like, for example, if you want to replace all the windows, we would, to the level of detail of exactly what brand and a brand and model, because and I think some closer examination of exactly how bad the windows are, especially the front facade. I mean, that it's really critical. And we have gone through window issues on many structures. One that springs to mind is a Central Church, where they were replacing windows, and they were doing it with very nice replacements, actually. But you know, and it was a little different there because I think they were downtown overlay district, but still, it's my opinion anyway. And I think when a window expert could confirm that many of those windows are certainly don't have to be lost. And I can tell you that I can't imagine a replacement window looking nearly like what's there now, unless it was custom made, which I don't think is going to be cost effective. I think at that point, it would be cheaper to just have them fixed up, because again, except for a couple of exceptions, and to your point about consistency, we have seen it on many properties, and I'm sure we'll continue to see it, where one facade might still have original windows. Other facades, particularly as you go towards the back, either has, you know, compatible or reasonably compatible replacement windows or whatever. It's not, you know, it's not a look that is either unexpected or necessarily bad. And I see a couple hands up from my colleagues, so why don't I let you all speak? Also, I'm collaborating here. Commissioner Morgan, did you want to add something?
Yes, this is follow up to my original comment about the roof height datums on the rear addition. I think a simple addition to the elevational drawings that would communicate a lot of information would be just on the existing elevations to show existing floor levels and ceiling levels and provide those heights. And then likewise on the proposed, so that we can compare them. I think it would be a very simple thing for the architect to provide. I'd like for her to provide the additional study of the unencumbered gable end also in conjunction with that. But of course, that's the applicant's choice whether they want to pursue that or not. But I think it would help us understand exactly where the floor lines are in both the existing house and in the proposed changes.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Hopefully, I trust you understand what he's referring to, Mr. Primack. Just as in the one we're looking at now that shows the rear elevation, there are dashed lines indicating like existing fascia and so on. Something similar that shows the existing floor levels or ceiling levels, whichever, and the proposed. That I agree, that would be very helpful. I also saw a hand up from, was that it, Joe? Mr. Morgan, oh, your hand. Okay, your hand went down. Okay, Commissioner Fay, your hand is up. Did you want to add a comment?
Yeah, I'm going to try to play both sides of the fence here, if you allow me.
Can't stop you.
So I'm trying to think of what order to put this in. I live in this neighborhood, and this is I think we all know that this neighborhood was arguably devastated whatever number, nearly 100 years ago when they put the highway in, right?
Mhm.
And,
Route 1, yeah.
and so it's really half a neighborhood. Summer Street and Winter Street are half a street. And in addition to that, Winter Street is really half of a street, and that you got we have a closed restaurant, a closed donut shop or soon to close, a commercial building, condos, and then right in the middle of this section across from the sunken highway is this house that, as I said before, I drive by this every morning when I go to school. I walk by it on a regular basis. I walk the rail trail regularly. You absolutely, by the way, can see the back of the house from the rail trail, spring, summer, winter, fall. So that needs to be taken into consideration, and that point has been made. But this looks, over the years that I've lived here now, 12 years, this looks like a house that's just going to fall down one day. And I guess my point here is that there are definitely windows that I would, as an amateur, would find it hard to believe that you could save, and that they're almost splinters. I've seen windows open, and that top floor on the right-hand side as you're facing it, I've seen that window wide open in inclement weather in the wintertime. I didn't think anyone lived here, and I'm talking about for years. I thought it was an abandoned house. And my wife and I would oftentimes, and then we saw it on the market and we thought, my God, how much would you have to put into this house? So I guess what I'm asking for is, and I know that we will do this, is that we can sort of reach a reasonable compromise in order to save this house. And if part of that compromise is that there need to be replacement windows, let's say on the top floor in the front, but some windows on the side can be saved, or vice versa, whatever it is, I think that's what we have to do, because I don't, this could be the centerpiece of the entire neighborhood if it's restored properly. So that's all I'm saying. So I would like the commission to think about that as well as Mr. Freeman. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Well put. Peter McNamee, I see your hand up as well.
Yes, Chair. I'll be brief because I'm repeating a lot of what's already been said, but I want to be a little bit more specific with regard to the detail in the drawings. We've had applicants come before us with plans that didn't have sufficient detail regarding trim, different treatments, just enough detail. And on revisiting the properties, find that the trim has disappeared. It's been replaced with flat stock. Different things have happened. I would want to see considerably more specifics about how the details are being treated. Mr. Primack says that the flat stock is only being replaced where it is currently flat stock, which is terrific. I'm wholly behind that. But I think we should probably, and this may be a matter for a different discussion, we get a variety of submissions and we get all kinds of drawings, and they are often wildly inconsistent in terms of simple detail. And these are architectural elements. This is not rocket science. You show what the existing condition is and you give the details on it, and you show what is proposed and you give the details on it. And we rarely see that. And we don't see that with these drawings. So I think Commissioner Morgan was touching on it with the level of detail that he's looking for. I would look for that also. I would look for specifics. I'd look for existing conditions photos of each type of casing, be it window, door, what have you, cornices. Let's get a record of what exists and a record of what is proposed, which should be replication or restoration. And then we have a record. We know what's going to happen with this property. As for the windows, I would repeat everything that Chris Fay said. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And one thing I'll echo from Mr. Fay was about the idea of compromise, and I think that's what we very often do. Often we don't end up with maybe what would be a preservationist dream result, but and so the So we give yield on some things, and the owner or the applicant or the contractor might yield on some things, but I think we generally arrive at something that everyone can live with. At least that, so I think that's a reasonable way to go about it. Vice Chair, well, Peter, your hand is still up. Did you have any more you want to add, or are you all set? Oh, went down. Okay, Vice Chair Pecknick, I see your hand as well. Did you want to add in?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that just as you explained that we are referring to the secretary standards,
Mhm.
we also need to refer to the city's guidelines for the preservation of historic wood windows in Newburyport last year. It does not
Right.
have footnotes that say, well, unless you don't feel like it. So I feel like that's the starting point for the discussion and not a luxurious element of the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's is that posted? It must be posted on the site, probably somewhere
Yes.
around.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And what's it called again, Patricia?
It's on our website. It's guidelines for preservation and
Right.
replacement of historic wood windows in Newburyport, and it actually explains about the energy efficiency of such windows and why we prefer to have them inventoried and photographed and then evaluated and then restored and then repaired, or they cannot be repaired, replaced in kind with similar materials.
Yeah. So then I think what remains is so Mr. Premack, I think you understand that some work needs to be done on your proposal to make it more complete. So what I would ask you is, could you please, anything that you're not clear on what you need to add, ask us, and we'll try to be as clear as we can so that you don't have to keep, this doesn't keep going back and forth. We're happy to, I think we've been pretty specific between the various commissioners as to what, we're looking for, specifics on windows, on window casing and trim, what exactly what the plan is there. I know there's also some rod at the bottom of the trim around the front door. I'm sure you have plans about what you're going to do there. On the now, some of this you've provided. You did add details on what type of clapboards you plan to use, which was thank you for that. You should probably, I think it would be good to even include the fact that because of the historic nature of the property, the reveal, so that's explicitly called out, but between the clapboards. And what am I missing? And the additions to the drawing that Mr. Morgan mentioned, I think I agree that would be extremely helpful for us to better understand what the nature of that build out is in the back. It's not that you can't, interior demo is not under our purview, so we can't really address that per se. But we do have a concern based on things that have happened in the past that, these things can, kind of grow beyond the initial scope as things are discovered. So it's important that, that's where we're coming from. And the areas depicted for demolition that basically show like the windows and the patio doors and so forth, there's obviously more demolition than that going on, but as you say, most of it is interior, so that wouldn't count toward the 25% per se, so on. So we understand that, and that's fine. And I understand your comments about the structural engineering problems. Obviously, even if there was an engineer involved, he would probably want to see the framing, which he obviously can't do until some interior demo is done and so on. So do you understand what it is we're asking, so that you can come back with that and we can try to resolve this?
I do, but I guess if I say restore something as existing, I'm assuming that you look at the drawings, you see what the windows, you see the picture, and you say you want to have a record of what's there. You do. You have pictures, you have a physical record, so that you can go back and say, this doesn't look like what was in the original picture.
Mhm.
And I get that without having to detail each and every single window. But if that's what you want, then, so be it. I have no problem with the floor lines. I think that's actually a good idea. Showing where those floor lines are, where we want to try to raise them, etc. I could even maybe get a little bit more detail on those back rooms. And and then lastly, I would say that I will be officially owning this house by the end of next week. So prior to the next meeting, we may want to postpone that meeting if I don't have enough information, but I should be able to be in that house and check every single window as to its usefulness or lack
Right.
thereof
Right.
before the next meeting, and to provide you with a report as such. Maybe pictures, maybe some videos, whatever you need.
Okay, well, you can just let us know if you're ready for, when you're ready.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be the 9th. If you need a little more time, that's fine. You can just let the planning office know, and obviously we're not going to, you're under no pressure to return until you feel you've got something that's complete and adequate, so that these various concerns that we raised tonight can be addressed.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, I do this not because it's, all that, I don't say all that profitable. Of course, there's a business to it, but I do it because I enjoy it, for the same reason you guys do, for the same reason why you guys keep watch on every house. I like to see one house at a time in this town get better, and to empathize with Chris, who said he lives around the corner. I'm walking by this house all the time too. And I say, it does look like it's going to fall down, and I'm excited to, turn it back into a showpiece in the neighborhood.
Right. Well, I also walk by
But it does
quite
take a
often.
lot.
Yep. And to me, it doesn't. I wouldn't say it looks like it's going to fall down, because it looks like it's still pretty straight and level and plumb and all that. So I think the framing is in pretty good shape. But yeah, it definitely needs attention. And I think with the right kind of attention, I don't know how much restoration, preservation type work you've done, but with the right kind of attention, this could really be a gem. And I would encourage you to do that, because it actually will definitely add value to if you are going to turn around and resell it, it will significantly add to the value if it's done right that way. Anyway, okay, well, thank you, Mr. Primack. Did you have any last questions or concerns before we go to our next item?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so
we'll see you all on the 9th, or we'll be in touch before then, one or the other.
Okay, and if any questions come up, do contact Caitlin or someone in the planning department, and we're all constantly in touch. If we have any questions for you, we'll probably pass it through them as well. If anything should come up, that somebody thinks of something, that in a fever dream or something. Okay, so
Chair Richards, could I
yes.
make one final comment? This is Joe
Sure.
Morgan.
By all means, Joe.
I believe Mr. Primack mentioned submitting structural plans. I just want to clarify that we're not asking for structural plans. We're asking for an existing conditions assessment by a structural engineer. In other words, to look at the foundation, to look at the framing, to look at what you're proposing, and to give an extra level of assurance both to you and to the city and to our commission that there's no glaring unforeseen items that might prevent a successful project. I just want to say that we looked at a project today where everything had been done just as Mr. Primack had described, basically rebuilding and reinforcing an existing exterior wall, but it was all built on rotten stills. And that's the kind of thing we don't want to happen. And it's something that seems really silly, but I think we're talking about due diligence. We're talking about making sure everyone is comfortable about proceeding. And I think that's what our commission, as part of our role. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to help the city and all of its contractors and developers and builders to have a successful project. And that's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
I totally understand, but again, I can't get I can't get into checking on it until we get into some demo in the building. You know, the foundation, the basement framing we saw is very solid. Certainly, you know, we'll be looking at the sill. We always do. We don't try to put anything on rotten sill. But again, I can't do that until, you know, I can't put the cart before the horse until we start to do some demo.
Okay, do you plan to do that? And I see your hand, Patricia, so we'll get to you in just a sec. Do you plan to do that, because that's something you can do as soon as you are, have closed on the property. Is that right, Mr. Primack?
Yes and no. I can ask for, I can submit a permit for exploratory demo, which usually gets granted, meaning I can't take anything out on the outside to check that in. So yeah, you know, but it will take, you know, it'll be well after September 9th is the problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you know, okay. Well, again, you know, it's, the night is young, so to speak. All right.
Yeah.
But I hear Joe's concern, and frankly, I am,
Well, it's my concern as a builder. Sure. We're not, you know, I don't want to, I'm not going to spend several $100,000 restoring a house that's, you know, on a bad foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. And the job he was referring to, by the way, was obviously was not anything you were involved with. It was somebody else entirely. Apparently didn't have your experience or whatever. But as much as you could tell us about those existing conditions and as much as you can find out, we really do, you know, need that information.
Okay.
Patricia, what did you want to add? Oh, did your hand go back down?
No, I was just agreeing with Mr. Morgan. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, several of us we're pretty much of a mind on that, Mr. Primack. So that is, it's an important thing. You know, it's not you, so please don't take it personally.
No, not at all.
Okay, good, because we've had, you know, some experiences we care not to repeat. Okay.
I get in there. We get to clean it up a little. We may even be able to get you some photos of the framing, if possible.
Yeah, that
Right.
could be very helpful. And hopefully, I hope you don't find anything really bad.
me
I'm sure you too.
Me
Okay, well, thanks very much
All right.
for that. Well, let me just move on because I know I've been rebuked.
I guess that does it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. No, you're all set. There was something else I was going to add. Okay, those are the two action items of that type. There are a couple other things on the agenda. The first is regarding a pre-approval for the preservation restriction at 342 Merrimack Street. Many of you might remember this. I think, Mr. Cindrone, you were not, I don't think, on the board at the time this went before, but I think Mr. Morgan, I think you were on a site visit with us on this. This is a house down on Merrimack Street. It's kind of unique. It has that bay thing added to the second floor. It was a federal period house, originally was almost converted to look like a Greek Revival era house, but at least they did do a nice job with it. At any rate, you might be familiar with this so-called Section 6 thing. In this case, the owner has a large lot. He needs some special permits and so forth to take his two-family situation. It is a legal two-family now. He wants to make the old structure a one-family, and the second family, he wants to build a second structure on the lot. So he needs a special permit for that. In exchange for getting that, he has agreed to the public good of the preservation of this house. So this preservation has been available for us all to review. I know I've looked it over. Hopefully you have as well. The Mass Historical Commission has reviewed it, and they are pretty much ready to go with it once it passes, once it's signed off on by this commission, which is done by my signature and the mayor and the city council. So does anyone have any questions or concerns about doing this? What we need to do tonight is to approve or not an authorization for the chair to go ahead and sign the restriction. I don't
Hi,
see-
Glenn, it's Caitlin.
Yep.
Hi, Glenn. So this letter is just merely correspondence letting you know that MHC, is ready to approve this. The applicant will be before you at your next meeting to run through, the final PR with you. And at that meeting, at your 9/9 meeting, is when you'll look at it and then, vote to approve it.
I'm sorry, I thought that, correct me if I'm wrong, there was one that was going before the city council quite soon. I thought it was this one, is it not?
No, I think that's the PUMC.
Okay, my error then. Okay, so the correction then is that well, I was partly right. Mass Historical has given it the okay, and that the next meeting, the applicant is going to come in, go over it, and at that point, ask us to approve it. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. I will then correct my little minutes here. Okay, so then it's just an FYI at this point that we do not need to take any action or motion at this point. I would encourage you though to take a look at it. It's pretty well done PR. I think they've been getting better over time. I guess as a result of doing so many, but it'll be back before us for vote on approval next meeting. The other item is 190 High Street. This one is also under a preservation restriction, and I did check, and that restriction does, it has kind of condo units within it, and basically all this is that every preservation restriction is that we approve and accept is in perpetuity. That is, even if someone dies, moves, sells the house, whatever, that preservation restriction stays with that property, and they are obligated to inform the new owners about the restriction, what it means. I was able to contact, and this is news even to you, Caitlin and Andy, I was able to contact their attorneys over at Tomlin's, not the ones here in town. Where is it? Finneran and Nicholson. They got on, Sarah Wolf was on the phone with me, and I think someone else at the firm, I didn't catch the name, but anyway, they told me that they're closing on this tomorrow. That's why I called, because time was so critical. That the new buyer, the new owner, proposed new owner, has been given a copy of the preservation restriction and been informed of it, so they are fully aware of that. So I was very happy to hear that they've taken care of that. So that's pretty much nothing for us to really do on that. They've been informed. It wasn't, looking at the PR and then Caitlin, it wasn't clear if it's our duty to inform the buyer or theirs. I think it should be theirs, but in any event, they've been informed. Okay, any questions on that? Don't really think so. And finally, I just have two very quick updates from the chair. I'll cover briefly. There was a meeting with Greg Earls. He is the new building commissioner. Vice Chair Pecknick, Joe Morgan, and myself met with him a few days ago, partly to get better acquainted and also partly to get better clarity around the application of building codes to antique structures. We run into this a lot. It came up in the discussion of Winter Street we were just having a little while ago. And Mr. Earls made some very useful clarifications. And that's that this notion of updating for code compliance, that is not a justification or a reason to make an alteration. In other words, that is not, that should not be the motivation or the driving force behind an alteration. What happens, it's the other way around. Someone decides they want to do an alteration, make a change. Depending on what they're doing, they may then be required to have, let's say, their new addition comply to the current codes. So it's not, so if someone comes before us or the ZBA or anyone else saying, oh, I have to do this because it doesn't comply with code, that's not correct. No one has to do anything. Otherwise, 80% of the real estate in Newburyport would be suddenly being forced to renovate to bring updated current codes because none of it's compliant. So that was very useful. And the other thing he mentioned was that building commissioners or inspectors, they do have a certain amount of judgment. And what he stressed was that his primary concern is safety. So if he feel like, for example, stairs, as you probably know, many of the old stairs are steeper and narrower than what might be called for in a current code. That's not necessarily illegal, even if there's an alteration nearby or some kind of other renovation going on. It's up to the building commissioner to decide if he feels it's a safety concern, he can require a change. But if he, reviews the plans and all that, and he doesn't feel that it is, then they don't necessarily have to change something like that. So those are my main takeaways. I would invite Patricia and Joe if they have anything, from their recollection of that meeting, if they'd like to add, you're welcome to. And I see a hand up by Mark. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering about this particular topic because this came up earlier in our discussion tonight, and this was not mentioned. So is this something that's going to be publicized? And then number two, if there is a code issue that comes up with a building that, say, we look at, what is going to be the driving force? Is it going to be the historical value of whatever we're looking at? Is it going to be the safety issue? Or is it going to be the code issue that's going to be taken as the most important factor in the decision-making process?
Well, that's a big question. This is and I may ask someone like Andy or someone to weigh in, but my understanding is that, first of all, it depends on the question, which board is before and so on. If the question impinges upon the safety of the occupants and the area by that, the stairway, the wall, the window, whatever it is in a section of the house that's being renovated, so it's coming under review, the building inspector is going to want to ensure that there isn't a danger to the occupants. So let's take 30 Winter Street as an example. He originally thought that the window opening wasn't going to be sufficient, right? A potential safety concern. However, he hadn't actually measured them yet, so he wasn't really sure. And B, they may or may not be a potential safety concern, depending on. So, for example, if I think the code calls for 3-point-something square feet of egress, and let's say I'm picking a number off the top of my head here because I don't know the code that well, but let's say it's 3.5 square feet, and he had 3.2. I'm going to guess the building commissioner, for the sake of keeping historic features such as those wonderful windows, might say, that's sufficient. So that's where the latitude comes in. And Joe, I see your hands up, so I'm hoping maybe you can shed some more light on this.
Well, I remember him saying that it's really on a space-by-space basis, and that he gave the example of 2 Neptune Street, where the proposed alterations by the owner were trying to leverage code issues, but he said he made the point that if the owner doesn't change existing conditions, then everything is grandfathered. So it's by actual making changes to the space that you trigger code requirements. Otherwise, many of these non-conforming issues go away, and or at least would have to be judged, determined by the inspector how serious they are. But the takeaway was that if you don't change the space, and that means if you don't change it substantially, like reconfiguring the walls, then you don't trigger the code compliance issue.
Yeah, that's right. I think he said something that's relatively straightforward, like replacing a window sash that's the same dimensions as the one that's there wouldn't necessarily mean you've got to bring the whole room up to code or whatever, ceiling height and that kind of thing. It's not that strict. And to add to what Joe was saying about Neptune Street, the verbiage he used was something like telling that owner that she created her own problem by initiating an alteration, in the sense that the building commissioner wasn't going to go in there and tell her that she had to bring her bathroom up to code. She created the issue by wanting to, make some changes, and his point was that she can't use code compliance as a justification or a reason why she has to do it, and a reason why the ZBA should approve it, or we should approve it for that matter. So does that make sense? I see you nodded, so hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the way it went. That's the way he described it, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought that was useful. And you also raised the question mark about notification. We have already started. I know Patricia's done some of this. We are working with the planning office to make sure that everyone, there's a lot of new members, particularly on the ZBA. We want them to be fully aware of this as well, so that they aren't, well, I don't want to say hoodwinked, hornswoggled, whatever, aren't misled, let's use that word, about what is or isn't required by code, and whether it's by an applicant, an attorney, a contractor, whatever. Because he was pretty clear about it, and we will do some. That was actually one of our reasons for meeting with Greg Earls, to help build better communication, both with the building commissioner's office, and we're going to continue that with both the planning board and the ZBA, so that everyone's on the same page and we all have the same clear understanding. Is that helpful?
Yep, thank you.
Sure. Joe, your hand is still up. Did you want to add anything else?
No, I just keep forgetting to lower it.
Okay, very good. Well, that brings us to the end of the formal content. Oh, I'm sorry, there was one other update, but it's really short. The city is looking at doing hybrid meetings. It's a little bit iffy. Patricia and I talked to Planner Port about this. But I'm hybrid, meaning that there would be a picture. I don't know if you're familiar with the senior center, there's a fairly large room. Picture a fairly large room where we could be socially distanced. We could be, and there's a projection screen that would have a Zoom meeting on it. So there would be participants, like board members like us, those who could attend in person, a Zoom meeting going on, people on the phone, members of the public and or commissioners. That's a hybrid scenario. You've got both in person and on Zoom. I know some of us who are teachers, I don't know if Chris, you had experience with this, but I know Patricia has. So it's what one of my favorite expressions, suboptimal in many ways. But I did want to just do a really quick kind of show of hands or whatever, how people feel about that. I know the only person I spoke to about it at all so far has been Patricia. I know she is lukewarm at best, actually not very keen on the idea. Does anyone else feel that they'd rather wait until, this COVID stuff is over and done and go back to full in-person without masks and so on? Or what's your sense?
My experience has not been a favorable one. As a teacher, it really creates an added level of confusion and delays. So I'm not at all in favor of it.
Okay, that was Mark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris, have you had any experience with this hybrid model or what? Did we still have Chris? Yeah, he's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any comments, Chris, on that? You might have had some experience with Zoom, I'm sure.
As far as hybrid model being like some people in person, some people.
Yeah, I just want to know if you have any feelings pro or con, that's all. Just to feedback for Andy mostly.
I would if that's what you're saying, I would have to agree with Mark. It's confusing. I mean, I know that we sort of did a hybrid thing. I don't remember the guy on the phone. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but I don't know. Are you saying that I don't have a great connection, so I didn't hear everything that you said?
Oh, again, just
if
very
we go back
informal.
in person, we're going back with masks on.
Well, nothing is definite.
We're thinking about that.
Nothing is definite. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Andy. Could I just jump in?
Sure.
Just to supplement what Glenn had
Yeah,
offered.
sorry.
Just to supplement what Glenn had noted, we have coordinated with the senior center on the zoning board of appeals and the planning board. We're now doing that for the historical commission. Our plan is, just like the other two boards, to move ahead with getting a hybrid setup for the meetings where we could meet again in person, but still have the remote access for folks that need it. We're also keeping an eye on the protocols for COVID-19 right now. As of last week, and from this week going forward, masks are required at public buildings like the library, city hall, and senior center. So you'd have to wear masks. So there's a couple of things reasons for, I think, holding off a couple of weeks longer, at least for having the in-person meetings. One is to do a proper test run of the equipment with new mics that are being purchased to make the audio better. Because they've noticed issues with the so-called OWL camera that was purchased for the digital setup to make it more seamless. They've noticed the audio doesn't work as well. So that, combined with the fact that you now have to wear masks, means that you probably would not hear each other as well, even worse through the masks, and then you wouldn't be able to read each other's lips either. So the overall incremental benefit of actually meeting in person versus Zoom seems relatively small right now. So we think it's better to work out those kinks and issues, make sure that the room is reserved. And what we would do is, pending all those things sort of jiving, either the removal of masks or everybody deciding they want to move ahead with masks in person, that and the microphones being in place. And should we need to go back to remote because there's any existing bookings on a historical commission meeting night, we would keep with our usual nights, revert back to remote only for those nights where there's an existing conflict at the senior center, as we are doing now with the ZBA and planning board, so as not to bump folks. We would then, transition back to, these hybrid meetings as soon as we're able. But the general consensus from folks we've gotten from ZBA, planning board, and talking to the chair and vice chair of the historic commission was just that it didn't make a whole lot of practical sense to do it, this month, let's say, or the month of September, at least initial weeks, because the new mics aren't there to provide a better audio. You have to wear masks, and the new microphones aren't there. So,
Yeah. Peter, saw your hand up. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of this idea. I see no reason to push it. I know we're all anxious to be completely rid of the COVID scenarios, but I see nothing but confusion coming from this. I'm not a teacher, but Mark's comments, Chris's comments are telling. But
Yeah.
in my business, I know that we have had situations where we've had to have a hybrid meeting with people in a conference room and people on the phone and people on the screen, and it's not productive. It's productivity.
Yeah.
Also, if we're in a hybrid meeting and you have people physically in the space having to be masked, communicating with people who are on the phone or whatnot, I think that one of the benefits of this mode of meeting is that the public can see the people who are expressing opinions about the things that they want to do. There's a lot that's expressed in the words that we say, and there's a lot how we say it, and our body language. So I don't like the idea of going to a meeting and hiding during it. So back to my original point, I see no reason to force this. Let's get through all of this. This is fine. This is working. Let's not push it.
Yeah, I think Planner Port is basically saying a similar feeling. Okay, I kind of thought that's pretty much where people would come down. I think we're all pretty close to all being on the same page about that. There might be, probably what they may end up doing is, once we can meet in person without masks, have us all there without masks. And if depending on the size of the space, there could be, we don't usually have that many people show up anyway, unless it's something really big and noteworthy, like the Institution for Savings project was. But maybe allow either an audio or an audio video connection for people who want to listen in or be an interested member of the public without having to physically show up, especially like in winter and so on. Okay, well, thanks all for that. I think all that remains is to approve the minutes from the last meeting, right? So this would be the approval of the minutes from, what was it, the 12th? What was the date of the last meeting? Yeah, it was the 12th, wasn't it? September 12th?
August 12th.
August.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, month ahead of myself here, August 12th, yes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that
Move
move
to-
Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Is that seconded?
Yes, by Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So let's do a quick vote on that. And starting Malcolm Conweth, your vote on that. Okay, definite yes. Mark Syndrome.
So I did not attend a meeting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, well, yes, but you did listen to the
I
recording,
did
right?
watch the video, so I don't know how you want to consider this. I'm happy to approve the
Yeah,
minutes because it seemed to correspond to what I saw over my lovely viewing.
Okay, yeah, you're allowed to do that. And Chris, are you in the same boat?
Yeah, I would abstain. I didn't
Okay.
get to hear the whole thing, so.
Okay, yeah, that's appropriate. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia Pecknick,
Lost.
Vice Chair and Acting Chair for that meeting. Where are you, Patricia? Did we lose her? Oh, I don't see her in that. That's too bad. Okay, well, she is absent.
You may have lost her connection or.
Yeah, she was here until recently, and let's see, we have 2, 3. Well, we already have 4 affirmative votes, so with or without my vote, which is yes anyway, I'll can vote for the record. I'll vote yes on that. So we have 5 affirmative votes. So the meeting minutes from the August 12th are approved, and the only thing left now is to make and approve a motion for adjournment. Is that motion made?
So move, Mark Sandron.
Okay.
I'll second it, Peter.
Okay. Again, around the horn, Malcolm, your vote on adjournment?
Yes.
Okay, Mark Syndrome?
Yes.
Okay, Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. And we don't have Patricia, right? And the chair votes yes. So with that, we can sign off, and I bid you all a good evening, and thanks once again for your participation. See, we need the camera so we can do this and so we can do air quotes. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Good night.